So forestry is more than just a lumberjack. There is if you type loggers or lumberjacks into Google, you'll find out all sorts of stuff about American lumberjacks. And I want to say that is not what we do. Forestry in the UK is one of the best in the world. It is modern, it's professional. It is, for me, it's the industry to be in. And having just listened to agriculture, coming from an agricultural background as well, I can see the sway, and I'm going to try and sway you over to the forestry side. So, but who am I to tell you about this? So I left school at 16. I went to college, and rather than doing a agricultural course, because as I say, I was from a farming family, I picked up a chainsaw and thought this was great. Chainsaws, felling trees, big machines, absolutely loved it. And I've ended up here. So I started as a tree climber. I've done tree surveying work. I've been a woodland manager. I've done stuff with GIS. So that's producing maps, using drones, using GIS to produce the basic information that we use in forestry. I then became a forestry lecturer, so I went back into education to impart my knowledge. And the bottom picture there of the big machine is me showing the students, what a half a million pound machine looks like. And then I've ended up as a technical and industry support manager. So I now give presentations, I attend conferences. So I think my key takeaway on this is I've seen a lot of forestry, so ask any questions you want. But I've also been through the tools. I started right at, as I say, at 16, and that's where I wanted to be. I wanted to pick up a saw and go out and work. So where you start off is not where you end up, and it's really just in making sure you enjoy the jobs that you do as you go through life. So Confor, we describe ourselves as seed to sawn. There's about 80,000 people employed in forestry in the UK. The majority of those in Scotland. It is a very big industry in Scotland. And I think compared to England and Wales, Scotland gets forestry. So in terms of new houses, so new timber frame houses, 80% of them are made with Scottish timber. That idea of small circular economy is really important. Produce the timber in your local area, use it in the local area. The UK imports about 82% of the timber we use. So that's offshoring our timber needs, and we should be trying to avoid that and increase the amount of timber that we do here. Modern, professional, well paid, absolutely. I want to dispel the myth that you need a check shirt, a big bushy beard, and an axe to be a lumberjack. That's last millennia, so far gone. So we really have to focus on who modern professional foresters are. So, bit more myth busting, benefits. So creating jobs, soaking up carbon, boost the economy, homes for wildlife, all these different elements. And at the end of the day, we're still producing a product. For me, what I like doing is being able to walk through a woodland and seeing that I producing timber in 20, 30, 40 years, but also enjoying the wildlife that's there, seeing the fact that we've got different species, we've got different wildlife, that the woodland forms a massive element of what we talk about in terms of biodiversity, in terms of carbon capture. It's multifunctional, and I think there's a lot of bad publicity about monocultural forestry. Monocultural forestry did happen last millennia actually. We haven't done monocultural forestry in so many years. We still have the legacy of that because we've got to remember that forestry is a long-term industry. I am happy being a small cog in a big wheel. I've planted trees for other people to fell, and I've felled trees that other people planted. 40 years is a short cycle for forestry. So I have to be able to look forward and plan forward, not just 2 or 3 years, but as I say, 20 or 30 years. I would quite happily sit in a room with other foresters and talk about what species we want to plant for climate change. And we're talking about 30, 40, 50, 60, 80, 120. If I talk about a cycle for oak in southern England, we're easily talking 120 years. That for me is fine because that is what forestry is about. It's that long-term planning. So if that floats your boat, brilliant, we can talk more about it. So I'm going to work through the whole cycle of forestry. So it starts with a seed. And these chaps here are using a new piece of equipment to line out seeds. In the same way, it's actually the equipment came from the salad growing industry. So this machine was designed to plant lettuces, and we've converted it to plant tree seeds. So these little seedlings are growing, and they'll plant about 1 million a day. And that's because in this country, we grow between 140 and 150 million trees every year. And they all need to be looked after, grown in fields, as you can see, and then lifted, carefully transported and sent out to the next site where they're going to be actually grown in situ. It's very rare for the established forests that you see to be just naturally grown and naturally pop up. They are managed. You don't often see that management happening because it's a little and often, as opposed to massive intense blocks. The felling element is a mass change on the landscape, but a lot of everything else is just slowly ticking away over year after year. So establishment, as I say, it doesn't just happen. So the picture you can see here, we've got a 360 excavator going over a second rotation site. So that means the trees have been grown there twice before. We've harvested them off as a crop, and that excavator is going in, it's clearing the drains out, and it's doing an operation called mounding, which is just creating a nice little pocket for those trees we just saw growing to be planted in and to grow. So you'll see this happening. This is one of those big changes I mentioned in the landscape, and we need people to be able to do this. And it's not just the operator to be able to operate in a difficult terrain. I mean, we get operators from the construction industry that come over to this and go, yeah, I want to do this. And they can't always get their heads around being so independent, being out in the field, out in the wood by themselves for all hours, all days, working away. It's different. It's not like driving around a construction site, which is generally relatively flat and there's lots of things going on. Here, you have to be thinking about yourself, your machine, the terrain all the time. And one of the key things you'll always hear from foresters is we want people who can think. Getting rid of that old style, I'm just out to fell a tree with an axe. We need real good thinkers. We need people who can plan, work, and operate independently. So I said I was a lecturer before I came to this role. So here's a few of my students replanting. So here we haven't mounded the site. We've just decided to direct plant through. So they are replanting through because it's important. It's a legal requirement to go and replant woodlands. So whenever you see trees and woodlands being felled out as a crop and taken away, we're going back in and we're replanting. So here we took out Sitka spruce and we're replanting with Sitka spruce. You know, it's an important, one of our most important timber crops in the country. So management and planning. Again, management and planners are key. Everything that happens in forestry has been decided well before that operation takes place. The machine doesn't rock up on to site, whether it be ground preparation, whether it be harvesting, whether it be extraction, before it's all been planned. And sometimes that planning can take some time. So you've got foresters, planners, surveyors, contract managers, ecologists, soils experts, wildlife managers, drone pilots, all these people feeding in to make that one operation happen. So lots of team working, lots of interactions with different people with different thoughts and different opinions on how that woodland should be managed. But as forester, you make that final decision, and that final decision effectively is going to last for the next 30, 40, 50 years as that site is managed through. So Willow Tree Wood here is a site that I worked on when I was a lecturer, and it's a small site and my students helped to manage it, and they took it through from that initial stage of what's there now, survey it, go and look at it, what species, what management techniques could we employ, carry that out, and then see it through. And then the next year of students picked up that management and carried it through. So they continued, every year was working through management of that site. And it's, if you like that team working element, there's always people to be getting on with and to be working with, but it also allows for that independence as well, because there will be times when you are working on your project out on site, surveying or managing or doing all these different aspects where you are either as a team or independent. So it allows for that bit of flexibility. Key things for forestry, you do get that inside work, you do get that outside work. My job right now, I'm very lucky in that I can pick my days. So I can look out the window and go, it's a bit wet out there today, I'll do my site visit tomorrow. However, if you're planting or harvesting, the chances are you're going to be out there all weathers, all days. And that's just what you prefer. As I say, when I started, I didn't even bother looking at the weather forecast. I was going out working no matter what. Just the mindset that you take. Here we've got a nice mixed woodland. So we've got Scots pine at the back that's coming through, and we've got silver birch and some more stuff in tubes at the front. So mixed woodlands delivering mixed benefits, and that takes a lot of thought and a lot of planning. As I say, monocultures are a thing of the past. how can we make this an attractive woodland for us to use, for wildlife to be able to use, and to hit all of our biodiversity targets. And roads. Roads are key in forestry. Most conversations about forestry, when we say, how are we going to harvest this timber, starts with, is there a road? And it makes sense. You need to be able to get lorries into the forest to be able to move that material. So we need good civil engineers. We need the machine operators to be able to do it. I'm working with the Forestry and Land Scotland team about they're looking at some bridge repairs, and I'm looking at bringing people in and doing a day on how to do bridge repairs, which isn't a typical forestry operation, but it's a really important one, because if we don't get this right, the timber that we've grown and looked after and managed for years and years and years and years isn't going to come to market, isn't going to come out and make all these products that we use in our everyday lives. So it's super important that we have a good road. And I'm hoping that many of you will have been out and used roads in forests, and you'll see the standard of the construction and the thought that's gone into them. So all these play a part of forestry. Research. Research is super important. We don't know everything, and anybody that claims to know everything is wrong. So there's lots of research. Forest Research is our main organisation that does a lot of that. However, the universities also do their own, and a lot more management companies now are branching out, pardon the pun, into looking at things that really impact them. So here we've got a picture of a flyover. So the best way to assess forest canopy is from the air. You can walk through a woodland and look up, but it's not as effective as flying over it and looking down. So drones are the new method of doing this, but for years we've been using helicopters, flying over and looking for, unfortunately, dead trees, which we can see here. And often those dead trees are caused by little weevils. They are not that size. They are smaller than that, but they are quite big and they do eat a lot of trees. So it is something that we need to work on. And we've got whole research packets going on about how to defend trees from these little weevils. Simple message for anybody, whether you come into forestry or not, keep it clean. And I think listening to our previous presentations as well, it applies biosecurity across land-based is so important. There are a lot of pests and diseases out there. We've got to try and tackle them. So wherever you end up, whatever role you get into, that's another key takeaway message. Keep it clean. Harvesting. So we've grown those trees in the nursery, we've planted them, we've looked after them for years and years, as I say, and we're now getting to the point where this is the money end, effectively. This is where we harvest trees and turn them into a product. So here we have one of my students very happily felling trees in the snow. This was a 35-year-old Sitka on a peat site. So we're taking the trees away to restore peat, because it's important to re-wet the peat and make sure that it doesn't degrade and dry out. So good environmental benefits. So we're taking off the product and we're getting some excellent biodiversity and some other benefits from it. 2 meters, so everything's going to pulp. So this will be going into paper. So this was all being transported to a company called Igersund on the west coast of Cumbria, who turn it into paperboard. If you've bought a smartphone, iPhone, those kind of, and you get it comes in a nice cardboard box. It's not like the cardboard box you get your cornflakes in or your Amazon packet. It's quite a high quality, very white product. Sitka spruce is an ideal product for that because it's already white, it doesn't have hardwood. So we were sending all our material over to Igersund. It's snowing, but he was sweating. He was warm and happy. The other way of felling trees is to sit yourself in a lovely machine and keep the snow off again and harvest. So you saw the previous student. He was a good student. He was felling the tree felling and processing in about 40 minutes. This machine here is doing that in about 30 seconds. So the machine here output is far higher. However, the cost of the machine is far higher. So you've got to do more work with it. So again, mechanization is a key part of forestry. It is a dangerous aspect at times. Chainsaws are dangerous. This machine takes a lot of that danger out of it for you. But we need people to operate them. And again, it's the right person that can work independently for long periods, but work as a team to be able to fix that machine, to be able to make sure that machine's working efficiently. That all comes together. So we've seen them fell it. This machine moves it, so it picks up from the stump, takes it to what we call roadside. So this machine is slightly cheaper, about 200k for this one, and capable of lifting logs and moving. And a lovely timber stack at the back. Quick rule of thumb, if you ever see a timber stack, don't climb on it because it could easily collapse, and it should never be higher than it is long, sorry. So if you've got a 2 meter length, the timber stack should only be 2 meters high. So if you're in a forestry site and you see 2 meter length timber stacked 4 meters high, then you know that there's something going on there. We could go for a low impact way, horse logging. So whereas the previous machine can make quite a bit of a mess at the time of harvest, using horses, very low impact. Obviously your output is significantly lower, but if we're wanting to avoid damage to the soil, avoid damage to the ground flora, this is the way forward. So horse logging versus big horsepower machines both have their place in modern forestry, even though it's a very traditional technique. Once it's at roadside, get it on a lorry. Now, when I'm selling haulage as a concept, as a career to young people, or to anybody actually, I always say you've got two options. You can go work for Morrison's and Tesco's and sit on the M74, the M8, and you can sit in traffic all day. Or you can drive a timber lorry and you put it through the forest roads. And we've already talked about forest roads. They're just wide enough for a lorry. We put hairpin bends in because it's not a public road. And if a hairpin bend fits the forest, that's what we do. So it becomes a lot more of a challenge. So you can sit behind the wheel and just sit in traffic, or you can drive a lorry up and down the forest roads where the challenge is actually all the time. They're not gritted, they're not de-iced, there's no snow plow up there. It's you, the elements, your machine, getting your product out. So significantly harder than working for Tesco's. Not that I'm knocking that, but forestry is the way forward for me. You'll always get that. Once you get it to the mills need people. We need good people. We need saw doctors. We need chemical experts. We need machine operators. We need lots of people to process this timber to effectively turn it from the round state that it turns up into the square state where we want to build with it. And that's what a sawmill does. They are very high-tech places. The last mill that I know put a new sawmill in was well over £1 million for that sawmill. That takes a lot of investment, but it's a lot of money and a lot of timber to put through to get that money back. But that's happening in Scotland. That's happening on your doorsteps across Scotland, where sawmilling is big business. And pallets. So again, just heard about how important farming is to Scotland. I'll say forestry is just as important, because your products, bar milk, all turn up on a pallet. We use timber in construction. Use timber in transport as well. So it's super important that we reduce our world carbon footprint, use what we've got on our doorsteps. So lots and lots going on in forestry. It's not just bushy beard, check shirt and an axe. And I'll almost finish. So where can you go to study forestry? We've got two main sites. We've got the Barony just north of Dumfries and the Scottish School of Forestry just outside Inverness. Both have excellent high quality forestry courses that will teach you what we've just hopefully kept time on and rattled through. So that is me, and happy to take questions.
Thanks so much for that, Richard. Do we have any questions for Richard in his fantastic presentation? Let's have a look in the question and answer box. So Richard, what advice would you give to any young person that was keen to come into this industry?
Lots of different advice. Try it out. Find somebody that's willing to take you out and shadow them for a day or two, depending on what you're interested. I've thrown so many jobs at you. Find what interests you, what aspect interests you. Go out and experience it. And even actually, before you sign up for a course, and I think this is general advice for all courses. Go and experience it before you plunge into a course, because the worst thing to do is get 2 or 3 months into a course and then realize you don't like it. It's very hard to swap and change. Go out and experience as much as you possibly can, find it what it is that you like, and then follow that through.